Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Well, tonight we're going to take a look at impeachment from several angles. We'll start with the former federal prosecutor to take a look at the very latest and also the latest trouble for Rudy Giuliani. Then, the politics of impeachment with ABC News political director Rick Klein. He gives us the latest from the Hill. Also, what did the founding fathers have in mind when they put impeachment into the Constitution? We'll talk with the guy who actually wrote the book on it. You'll be interesting what he has to say. Now, you would think with everything that's happening in D.C. these days, the Justice Department would certainly have its hands full. But you'd be wrong. Attorney General William Barr, he has found time to expand the DOJ's investigation of the origins of the Russia investigation. Think about that. Even though every U.S. intelligence agency, they've confirmed that Russia did meddle in our election and is doing it as we speak and will do it again in 2020, Barr instead is probing those agencies themselves. It's the investigation the president's been calling for months, claiming that the Mueller investigation's origins were not only a witch hunt, but illegal.
The Russian investigation is a hoax. It's a phony hoax.
Still, FBI and Justice Department officials have long maintained that numerous contacts between Trump associates, coupled with the Russians hacking the DNC, called for a counterintelligence investigation. But Trump's appointed Attorney General Barr, he's been skeptical of that probe since taking office.
I think spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur.
Barr had authorized longtime prosecutor John Durham to conduct a review to see if the initial investigations and court-approved surveillance was done by the book. Now, word first reported in the New York Times and confirmed by ABC News is that Barr is giving Durham the power to conduct a criminal investigation, giving him the power to compel witness through subpoenas and the ability to seek a grand jury. It's unclear what, if any, criminal violations took place and whether anyone ultimately will be charged. The president, he's claiming treason.
We can never allow these treasonous acts.
And speaking of the Mueller probe, a federal judge has just handed a significant victory to House Democrats. The judge, he just told the Justice Department to release grand jury evidence from the special counsel's investigation. That information could aid the impeachment inquiry. Now, the man on your screen, he could also help that inquiry. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton, he could be testifying. His attorneys reportedly negotiating possible terms. Bolton, no fan of Trump, and has been mentioned by other people who've appeared before Congress, so he could prove pivotal. Plus, House Democrats, they've just subpoenaed 3 Trump administration officials. 2 of them work in the White House Budget Office on national security issues. The third, a State Department attorney. All 3 were asked to voluntarily appear, but they said no. Now, Dems trying to force them to show up. And earlier today, we caught up with Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney. He went off against the Republicans who were standing in the way of some of this information and obviously opposing impeachment altogether. Maloney, he serves on the Intelligence Committee. Take a listen to what he said.
Ask yourself why they aren't contesting the core facts that point to an abuse of power by the president. Instead, they're engaged in, I think, character assassination against a good chairman. They're engaged in process arguments that aren't really the point. The point is, what did the president do? And was it okay? And the evidence suggests what he did was terrible, and he should be held accountable.
Then, of course, what would a week be without Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal attorney? He's been unusually quiet, no wide-eyed interviews lately, no unhinged comments. But there was a butt dial that we'll tell you about in a second, but that doesn't count because, as I said, it was unintentional. Now, we already know that 2 of Rudy's associates, they've been arrested and they're now facing federal charges. But now we're finding out that the feds, they're also taking a close look at Rudy himself. Politico breaking that story, and I'm quoting here. The scrutiny isn't coming just from previously known probes by FBI agents in the U.S. Attorney's Office based in Manhattan. The criminal division of the Justice Department in D.C., they've taken an interest in the former New York mayor too, meaning an expansion of resources that indicates the politically sensitive probe into the president's personal attorney is both broader and moving at a faster pace than previously understood. Rudy is having a tough week, and I'm talking also about that butt dial we mentioned a minute ago. Rudy accidentally called an NBC reporter late at night and left a rambling 3-minute voicemail. unknowing that they were on the other end of the line. Rudy is heard talking about needing money, and he also trashes the Bidens. Rudy also talks about business deals in Bahrain and Turkey, but it is unclear what all those are about. Well, joining us now to talk about Rudy, William Barr, impeachment, and so much more, former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi. Well, Gene, we never run out of topics, and before we get to Rudy and all the nonsense, let's talk about the significance, and that is of what we heard from Ambassador Taylor. By all accounts, some folks had to pick their jaws off the table by what he said and the credibility that he brought to it. He drew a direct line from the president to his chief of staff to the messaging here that no quid, no quo as it related to Ukraine.
Well, the argument that the Trump people were making before Bill Taylor testified is there was no quid, there definitely wasn't a quid pro quo. But Bill Taylor put the last nail in the coffin in my book, and he is icing on the cake. And the reason is this: he is a career guy. He's worked under Democrats and Republicans. He is the choice of Donald Trump and his administration to hold the position of ambassador or acting ambassador to Ukraine. He is unassailable. And for them to attack his character and his recollection is downright pitiful. I think of all the witnesses that you will hear, Richard, he will probably be the star witness in any proceeding, including a trial.
And I'll also add to that that Secretary Pompeo literally talked him out of retirement and asked him to come back to assume the post here, he the Secretary of State. Now, talk about what happened just in the last hour here, where a federal judge has now said to the Dems, basically, you can get all of the background here on the Mueller report. You can get this information. Talk about how potentially significant and additive that is to their actual probe.
Well, the person who should be very fearful of his integrity and his credibility is the Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr, who in 48 hours, basically a New York minute, wrote that 4-page letter saying the Mueller report was a nothing burger and that there was no obstruction. Well, it's clear to everybody under the sun that Bill Barr didn't read all the materials in 48 hours. He probably did not care what was in those materials. He already had made his decision. These grand jury materials, the transcripts, possibly documents, they are going to shed light on why Robert Mueller, in volume 2 of that report, basically said that on 10 occasions the President of the United States criminally committed obstruction of justice.
Well, let me stay on Barr with you for a minute, because on top of that, the idea, I mean, we tend, Gene, to just get used to things, but the idea that in the middle of all this that we're talking about, the Attorney General is directing his own agency to investigate its own people at DOJ and other agencies as well. And now it's a criminal probe to relitigate the Russia probe that A, every intelligence agency said was real, and B, we know from the Mueller report, they confirmed and even added on to it. It's crazy for anyone outside who thinks the Attorney General is just supposed to be some political rubber stamp or personal attorney for the president. That's not how this is supposed to work.
Well, John Mitchell is looking better and better. And here's the main critique I have about Bill Barr. And I actually had kind things to say about him when he was nominated. Very kind things. Not anymore. Big disappointment. But what really bothers me is that John Durham has a very outstanding reputation as a career prosecutor who calls balls and strikes. And since we now are in World Series time, what Bill Barr did by using John Durham for this witch hunt, this deep state investigation, to draw a baseball analogy, it's like in the World Series using Mickey Mantle in his prime to be the first base coach. What a waste of Justice Department resources to have John Durham spend a second investigating nothing. That upsets me immensely.
And one more thing on this, which is, and this is inside baseball, but you can explain it. So I've had a lot of former folks from the SDNY in my office, on my set, excuse me, and they went in to great detail on how the SDNY is also known as the Sovereign District of New York. Well, apparently, as we've learned, they're moving real fast on Rudy here, faster than a lot of people may have expected. And now, all of a sudden, what they call main justice, which is DOJ, which obviously includes Barr, they're getting involved. Now, I understand they're part of the DOJ, but I've heard two schools of thought. No matter what they come up with, there'll be an imprimatur and credibility that the DOJ can't turn around later on and say that these guys went rogue. But conversely, I'm not being some conspiracist when I say I got a legitimate worry that Barr's going to tip off Rudy where the state of the investigation is and what he ought to worry about. Am I wrong?
Let's put it this way. Based on the conduct of the Attorney General in the last few months, any conclusion you draw, Richard, has validity to it. Here's what troubles me greatly about the Attorney General. He needs to recuse himself, R-E-C-U-S-E, from any of this Rudy Giuliani stuff. He's essentially, the Attorney General is essentially not the attorney for the people, but the attorney for the president. He's just like Rudy Giuliani. So he should get out of this. He is losing credibility each day. Drip, drip, drip. Please, Mr. Attorney General, get your hands off of this. You are making a fool of yourself.
And do you think there's potential interference, or do you think the way that it really works with enough professionals, both at the Southern District and also still at DOJ, that if there was attempts to put a thumb on the scale or to quash a report or to change or limit the scope of the investigation, that nobody would stand quietly and let that go, that it would get public?
Let me tell you this. In July 1997, Gene Rossi was a whistleblower. There were political appointees making political decisions about a criminal case that indirectly could affect the nomination of Eric Holder for Deputy Attorney General. I was a whistleblower. I took holy hell for it. But I look in the mirror each day and I said it was one of the greatest professional decisions I ever made. And what you're going to have here is you're going to have career prosecutors who are going to say enough is enough. I can't take it anymore. And you're going to have leaks up the wazoo, and it's going to go to the Attorney General's office on the 5th floor.
Finally, Rick, later on in the program, I've got the guy who literally wrote the book on impeachment from a historical standpoint and obviously bringing it to current day. One of the arguments we heard this week was the president not only reiterating, or maybe some of his associates, that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and not be prosecuted, but that nobody could even stop him. And again, I'll go back to our founding fathers. I know they never set us up to have a monarchy here, but are we going to get final clarity when this is all said and done, the limits to executive power, and that we actually do have a thing called co-equal branches of government, and that the judicial and the legislative branch actually have an equal say?
You know, Richard, when I heard through the news the argument that the attorney made about shooting somebody on Fifth Avenue, and that while the president is in office, neither the federal government nor state governments can investigate a murder, I gotta tell you, when the history books are written, this year, last year, and next year are gonna be one of the most profound years to determine whether our democracy survives, whether our Constitution is followed, and whether we as a people are able to take control. It's a scary time, but it's an incredibly historic time.
Gene, as always, my friend, great stuff today. I appreciate you making time for us. Thank you so much.
Have a great weekend.
You as well. All right, when we come back, I promise more on impeachment. We're going to have new details on what could be a game changer, that and the politics of the probe, as we head out to our nation's capital. We'll be joined by our friend, ABC News political director, Rick Klein.